Okay, so in this video we're going to look at the economy and development of the French regime, a regime that lasted from 1608 to 1760. We're going to look at their economic policy, the fur trade, their effect on the Amerindians, again, because the Amerindians really can't catch a break in Canadian history, jobs in New France, and economic diversification. So France's economic policy towards their colonies, New France included, was called mercantilism. My colleague Sean O'Neill came up with my favorite way of explaining this idea in just 4 very easy steps. So step 1, a mother country, like France, takes resources from its colonies, New France. Step 2, the mother country uses these resources to make goods. Think taking things like beaver pelts or furs and then turning them into hats. Step 3, the mother country sells the finished goods back to the people in the colonies and to other countries. Step 4, the mother country becomes baller, she's making it rain with money. So the idea of mercantilism was so that the mother country could get rich off the resources from the colony. So how did this work for France? Well, step 1 is to take resources from New France. So we need to go and find a resource. So we need to go and find us a beaver. Oh look, we found one. There he is. He's so cute swimming in the water. So now that we found him and he's all cute, we're going to kill him. And we're going to skin him and we're going to take his fur. So now we need to go find a French coureur de bois, who was a guy who would hop in his canoe and get to the nearest trading post and sell this beaver pelt. So both the Amerindians and the coureur de bois hunted the fur and traded it at trading post. But this is our step 2, so getting the fur to the trading post. Step 3 would be that the factories in New France would turn these things into manufactured goods, so France would turn the fur into hats and clothes. And step 4, France would sell these products back to New France and other countries to make money, thus making the mother country baller. So mercantilism was just one of France's economic policies. The other was the triangular trade. So New France was only allowed to trade with France and her colonies. So the triangular trade was trade between France, New France, and the West Indies or the French Antilles. So you can see that because we're trading between France, New France, and the Antilles, we're going to end up with a triangle. So New France would send fish, fur, and wood to France. The Antilles would send rum, sugar, coffee, and molasses to France. And France would send manufactured goods back to both of those two colonies. But because New France wasn't allowed to trade with any other empire other than France, New France also traded with the West Indies, or the Antilles. So what do we need to know? Well, the sole purpose of mercantilism is to make the mother country rich. So triangular trade meant that France could also get rich because they got the raw material from New France, and New France wasn't able to get rich because they couldn't make the manufactured goods out of that raw material. So they didn't have the factories to make hats, while France did. The fur trade was arranged so that the Amerindians hunted the fur, the coureur de bois would trade the fur at the nearest trading post, France would turn the fur into hats, and then sell those goods back to the colonies for money. It was basically an economy that was entirely based on the fur trade. It was like a fur economy, and that was the whole thing. Now, the fur trade affected the way the First Nations and the Europeans interacted with each other. The French people of New France developed an alliance with the Huron and other native groups so that they would be able to get good fur for trading. And in return for giving the Europeans good fur, the Amerindians would get European goods. So you can see in this picture how this gentleman is wearing more European clothing. He has a metal knife in his hand, he has a rifle, and even just the way he's dressed is more European. So people are always interested in get-rich-quick schemes. The fur trade attracted a lot of people to New France, but none of them really settled for very long, but rather they made their money from the fur trade and then went back to France. The fur trade also brought in the development of trading posts. So the coureur de bois and the Amerindians would gather as much fur as they could in their canoe, and then would bring their goods to the trading post, which was often located near waterways. The fur trade also made things tense with the American colonies, so they began competing over who would get what territory, and both the English and the French wanted the best fur trading lands. So this created a lot of tension in the colonies and would eventually lead to war. It's like two kids wanting to play with one toy. Eventually there's going to be a fight. So now we're going to look at the main occupation of the people of New France, farming, or agriculture. So as farming techniques got better, there was extra food for the farmers, which they sold at markets in cities and even in France. So with farming and surpluses came special jobs that didn't exist before in North America. So on the seigneuries where the censitaire farmed, they grew wheat, which needed to be grinded into grains, which would be done in a windmill. Well, if you want to build a windmill, you have to think of what it's made out of. So if we just look at this picture of a windmill, we have wood, we have stone, we probably have metal to sort of hammer the nails into the wood. So all those things are going to require specific jobs. So for the windmill, which we can see is made out of wood, we're going to need carpenters. We're going to need these guys to build the windmill. So anything in the windmill that's made out of wood, we're going to need carpenters to build. But the thing is, they need nails and they need tools. And they just didn't appear, and you couldn't go to Rona or Home Depot or whatever to buy it. So what you end up needing is you need blacksmiths. So these guys would make nails, build tools, repair anything, machinery that had metal in it. So that's a new job just because we have a windmill. So you guys remember Jean Talon, the guy who brought those tough broads, the Filles du Roi, to New France. The reason why he brought them there was to increase the population through natural growth or baby making. Well, Jean Talon was one of the most important intendants of New France. Now, the intendant's main job was to handle the economy. Well, Jean Talon came up with ideas to increase the population, so now he needed to improve the economy. So what did he do? He went and opened up the very first brewery in North America. That's right, the very first beer made in New France came from Jean Talon's brewery. Beer did not exist in New France until Jean Talon opened up actually a brewery. But the problem with beer is they didn't have cans or six-packs or even glass to transport them in, so they needed to put them in something. Well, if you look at the picture, what are they rolling around? That's it. They're rolling around barrels. It was important to the economy of New France to make barrels so that they would be able to store beer and other liquids in it, so oil or anything else that they could possibly need to store. So barrel making became an important job. Another new job that the people of New France got was they started making hats out of the fur themselves. So before they would send the fur all the way back to France and then have the hats sent back to New France for the people to buy. But by making the hats in New France, the people started controlling their own economy. So you're starting to see like a development of a different sort of economy in New France. People even started making wigs. So even wig making became a job in New France. And if we go back to the windmill, also think the windmill was made out of stones. So we're going to have stonemasons in New France. So guys who would go and cut stone so that we would be able to build walls and things like that. So anything that could be built in New France, if you think about what you need, tools, buildings, hats, those all led to the creation of new jobs, which was important to the French economy. So now we're going to look at economic diversification. So all economic diversification means is new types of jobs, new types of businesses, instead of doing the same thing all the time. So again, we're back to our good old friend, Intendant Jean Talon. So he was in charge of this effort. He encouraged farmers to grow flax, hemp, and hops. And hops is really important to making beer, so it makes sense that he would encourage that. He also pushed for people to raise livestock and other animals. So now, we talked about how Jean Talon made beer. Well, think about it. If you have beer, you need a way of moving it around New France and the world. So he really started encouraging shipbuilding. So if there were boats being built, then he would be able to transport his beer from New France back to France and to other places. Another important intendant after Jean Talon was Jules Hocquart. He pushed even harder than Jean Talon to build ships. And he also pushed for iron ore mining, which is what this is. This is the iron ore mine in Saint Maurice. So the ships that he was building were mainly meant to transport goods to the West Indies, one of the legs of the triangular trade. But then later in 1738, in New France, we started building warships. So The economy is changing. So what do we need to know? Well, the main job was farming in or agriculture in New France. That's what most people did. Now, when it comes to our good old buddy Jean Talon, all you need to remember is the 4 B's. Broads, beer, barrels, and boats. So broads, because he brought in the feu de roi. Beer, because he opened the first brewery in New France. Barrels is a way to store the beer. And boats is a way to transport the beer. Although Gilles Hocquart really pushed more towards the building of boats and iron ore mining. Then we also have to think about all the different crafts in New France. So think about it again. Anything that could be built. So we need a trading post. We need a windmill. So we need the tools to build it. Well, if we're building a trading post that's made out of wood, we're going to need carpenters. If we need to bang everything together with nails and hammers, we're going to need blacksmiths. If we're going to be making beer, we're going to need barrels. If we're going to be taking part in the fur trade, we're going to need people who are able to make hats. And who doesn't love a good wig? So, did economic diversification work? Did New France have an economy that made the colony money and increased the population to an insane degree? Well, no. It was an epic fail. The people of New France ended up buying more goods from France than they sold to France. So they ended up importing more than they exported. So they didn't really make money there. The fact that they had craftspeople was good, but there just wasn't enough of them in New France. Mainly because people were always more interested in the get-quick-rich fur trade than a diversified economy. And probably finally the biggest barrier to a growing economy in New France was mercantilism. Because if you remember, the whole point of mercantilism is for the mother country to get rich, not the colony. So the idea was that France would get rich, not New France. So that's where I leave you with New France's economy. I know this video was a little longer than the others, but I hope it helps you study. Again, these are some of the sources I used. And that's it. Take care.